What is up? Thank you for tuning in to the MMA Podcast. It is January 14th, 2016, and we got a good one for you. This Saturday, we got UFC on Fox, TJ Dillashaw versus Dominic Cruz. Dominic Cruz, maybe the most unlucky fighter ever, looking to get his belt back after years of injury setbacks. Also, news and notes in the MMA world, UFC 197, that card that was breaking during last week's show. It's official, Conor versus Dos Anjos, home Tate. A couple other news and notes to touch on that we will get to in the show. Thanks for tuning in. I'm excited to do it. Let's do it.
You're listening to the MMA Podcast.
Lenny Hart, always psyching me up before every show. Shout out to her. Follow her on Twitter. And shout out to all of you beautiful listeners listening at home on either your mobile device, your desktop. You could be listening to this. Maybe you burned it to a tape or a CD and you're listening to it in your car. Probably not. But however you listen to the show, whether you're outside my window right now listening to me talk, however you do it, we thank you. As always, you can click the links at the top of the page on themmapodcast.com to find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube. Get the full library of interviews. We've had Misha on, Chris Lieben on, Eddie Bravo on, Aljamain Sterling on. Haven't had that many guests in the last year or so, but looking to get back into doing the guest thing. Actually have recently DM'd both Dada 5000 and Aljamain Sterling to maybe come back to the show. Maybe we'll get Ben Askren on here soon. I've been working over on his show, the T-Row and Funky Show, which I've mentioned it a few times, but it's a very, very good show about amateur wrestling. And at first I was like, I don't give a fuck about college wrestling, come on. But it's interesting, and you're hearing names and learning about people and learning about really the talent pool that we see most elite fighters come from. I mean, you look at champions, you look at the top 5, top 10, nearly every weight class. If there's one similarity you can pick out and have the most fighters, probably a collegiate wrestling background. So it's really interesting sort of following that, and hearing about whether or not people are going to make that transition into mixed martial arts, which it would be insane if someone like Jordan Burroughs came over. My God. But yeah, we might get Ben on here soon. Looking for the word on the street to come back any week now with Ramses at the Aunt Jimmy Show, and of course Coach Jamie Huey, the living legend. And yeah, it's an exciting year. It's going to be a good 2016. I just realized I probably need to mute the TV going on in the background with college basketball on. But it's perfect time to pass it over to my co-host on Twitter at Sweet Pappy Jones. He is P Money. Pat, what's going on, brother?
Big Jake, you know what? You get me hyped before and during every show. Always love doing it.
Let's get
hyped. Let's get hyped. That's right. Hype Bros Big Jake and P Money, here to give you the MMA detailed breakdowns that you love to hear. Always love doing it with you. And you know what? As you mentioned, the T-Row and Funky show that you fantastically produced there, I was reminded of a couple years ago, I want to say, way back when, that you and I actually interviewed Ben Askren on the MMA podcast. I want to say maybe this was 2013 or maybe 2014. I don't clearly recall now, but that was some time ago. He was great back then, and he's definitely good on his own show. So yeah, as you mentioned, Jake, definitely check out the old T-Row and Funky show. All the homies, the family and friends of the MMA podcast, give them some love, and very excited to break down UFC Fight Night 81 with you and get to all the news.
Get to all the news indeed. The one I sort of touched on the intro is that UFC 197 has been made official. It will be at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. Both news coming out of what it will be and what could have been. A UFC official confirming with MMA Fighting that Vitor Belfort turned down a fight with Anderson Silva at UFC 197, which was originally supposed to take place in Brazil on March 5th. Instead, now Silva will fight Michael Bisping late February in London. But Vitor pulling out of the card, apparently the big reason that it's going down in Vegas instead of Brazil. And speaking of that Vegas card, which Pat and I will be at, and will try and do a sort of live podcast gimmick like we did with 189, maybe try and offer up more content as far as, taking videos at the open workouts, maybe getting pictures in from the event itself, if we're lucky enough to get tickets. And of course, you don't get a text all day and then you start a podcast and they start texting you nonstop. I gotta mute this up here.
Murphy's Law.
But yeah, I did want to briefly talk about it. Just the one sort of caveat, we'll have plenty of time to stylistically break down the fights: Holm versus Tate, McGregor versus Dos Anjos. I just want to talk about the craziness and significance of Conor moving up, going for that second belt. Do you think it's something Dana should be doing? I mean, he's only let a fighter, a champion, fight for a different belt one time ever in the UFC. That was, I think, 9 years ago when Penn moved up to welterweight and GSP smashed him. And even then, Dana White, I looked back in the records. Even then, Dana White said, if Penn does beat GSP, and if he is holding two belts at once, he'll have to drop one and defend one. We're not going to let him defend both belts at the same time. They're apparently going to let Conor try and do it. He has been active, fought 3 times in 2015, fights seemingly every few months. He just fought last month, and he will be fighting again in March. Man, it's crazy how the sport changes, how Conor was just sort of thought of as a sideshow a year and a half, 2 years ago. And now, I mean, shoot, especially with Ronda having lost and, not fighting for a while, Conor McGregor is mixed martial arts, and he's demanding a lot of money and deserves a lot of money. He is the face of our sport, and it's crazy how fast this rise has come. But it's going to be a very significant thing that we could see a fighter lift 2 belts up in the air for the first time ever, and maybe the last time ever. hear all the time about, oh, we're going to see Weidman Jones versus Kane, GSP versus Silva, Aldo versus Pettis, which was probably the closest it came to actually happening. The fight was actually booked before it was canceled because of injury. Dillashaw Johnson, a lot of talk, a lot of yapping, but when it comes down to it, these champions sort of know their role and know, like, man, I'm doing really good in my weight class. He's doing really good in his. Instead of, if we fight one another, one of us has to lose, and it's going to cost our rep. It's going to, probably shake our confidence. It's going to do a lot of stuff. But, man, props to RDA for taking a fight and Conor for having the balls to move up. I just think it's crazy. I wish he could at least defend it once against Frankie. But the consolation of Frankie that he will get the shot, and he will get it at the biggest event ever at UFC 200. That makes it worth the wait, I think. I think, if they made Conor fight again, it'd be a travesty, but I don't think they're going to do that. So Frankie will get his, but what do you think? Think about Dana. They're moving him up quick and letting him do something that no one's ever been given the leash to do before.
Well, we touched on it a little bit last week when it was breaking, and basically what Dana had said was just that Conor McGregor wants to fight 4 times a year, and this is a guy who really has done everything he said he would do in his UFC career, from all of his fights, the finishes. I mean, he's basically called his shot every single time. I mean, I guess he's knocked everybody out except for Max Holloway, so that's, I guess you would say, kind of easy to call your shot when it's the same shot every time. That's like Ronda Rousey saying, I'm going to armbar this bitch. But he's been doing everything he said he's going to do, and he has been an active fighter in spite of having an ACL injury. That was the only time when he injured the ACL. And let's think about that for a second. In his second UFC fight, injured his ACL mid-fight against Max Hall. I forget if that was his second or third. But mid-fight, injured his ACL against Max Holloway, was out for like maybe 9 months, and he's been on a tear ever since. Hasn't lost a step and has won the belt. I mean, that is something in and of itself. And he has been very active. If he can keep that pace up, which apparently is something he intends to do, then, I mean, no reason for him not to theoretically be allowed to defend 2 belts. I mean, I don't think he would really have to put on a lot of weight to go to 155. This wouldn't be like, oh, he had to bulk up a lot to go to a different weight class. He's just perhaps not cutting as much.
Hot takes. Them takes is so hot they called the fire truck on him, son.
It's, for real, we're setting this bitch on fire with the takes. It's not something where, you see these guys, they lose a step when they're going back down after they have to bulk up. This is just him not cutting as much. So, hey, maybe he could be fresh and bounce in between 2 weight classes and keep that level of activity of 4 championship fights per year. 155 is basically a quite eased up cut for him, then, I mean, hey, that he's been just about as active at 145, barring that injury. So, throwing 2 fights in there a year where he wouldn't even have to cut weight, I'd say it's feasible. So, hey, more power to him. Giving him this fight at this time, I mean, it makes sense. He's already had 7 UFC fights. He won the championship belt. If he doesn't defend against Frankie, of course, that kills the shine. That nixes the super fight possibilities. So they're striking while the iron's hot here. And the iron, as you mentioned, has been very hot. Conor McGregor, he is that dude. He is the face of MMA right now. Ronda Rousey's still doing well. She's been able to stay in the spotlight, but as far as MMA is concerned, not so much. She's doing the Saturday Night Live thing this month. She's got the movie she's working on, but it's come out. well, we may touch on that a little bit later, but she's not necessarily the face of MMA right now. She's famous for being Ronda Rousey. McGregor, he's got all the shine, and like you said, big props to RDA. RDA was coming out after UFC 195 and saying, "Oh, or no, I want to say it was no, the UFC on Fox, event, and basically saying Conor McGregor should stay where he's at. He doesn't want any peace at 155, but Conor McGregor's coming up, and we're taking a look at the stats. They're the same height, and Conor McGregor enjoys a 4-inch reach advantage. So quite interesting. The size disparity may not quite be as big as perceived. I mean, judging by the stats, McGregor is, I guess you could say, technically the bigger fighter. Of course, you never know with the stat sheets. You got to see him side by side at the weigh-ins or something like that. One fighter might be taller or shorter than the other one is technically listed, but very close on paper. So it's very interesting. I can see why they're doing it. And also, if Conor McGregor is able to stay active and gets Frank Edgar a crack at that belt soon, why not? Might as well go for it.
Yeah, and man, it's a ballsy move because as hot as RDA has looked, man, I don't think anyone wants to fight him now, and Conor by no means is being forced into this fight. So good for him for taking on one of the hottest fighters in the sport. Speaking of hot fighters in the sport, Yoel Romero was ablaze after beating Jacare, after beating Lyoto, and it turned out he was ablaze with other things too. Test positive. Now, we were talking about it beforehand. Apparently, it's a potential violation, but from what I'm seeing, for all intents and purposes, we can assume he failed. It apparently was for peptides, which I'm pulling up Larry Pepe's Twitter right now. He is the guy to go to if you're looking for news about failed drug tests, anything like that. Pepe is the man. Pepe tweeting at Front Row Brian saying, might be late to the party, but a few things. There are many types of peptides, but common ground is that they cause the body to produce more of its own natural HGH. So this is different than taking synthetic HGH, but the goal is the same, to have more HGH circulating in the bloodstream so IGF-1 elevates in the liver, which is where desired benefits come from. Very difficult to detect. Timing is everything. Unless you test someone very close in time to when the peptide is injected, you will not catch them, in part because elevated hormones in the body, HGH or IGF-1, is your own natural version, not synthetic. I've seen suggestions that these peptides would have been to elevate testosterone levels, but all the peptides I'm aware of do not assert an influence on test levels, but HGH predominantly. Most popular form is a powder that mixed with water, then injected. Cream form less popular, but out there as well. And no, these are not taken in mass drug use. They are taking to access the benefits of higher pulsing natural HGH levels. I could go on and on, but yeah, he's basically spelling out that it's a strange one because it's very difficult to detect the peptides because they're just making natural HGH in your body. But he did pop. I think the real consequence we're going to be looking at here is he's 38, so if he gets a long suspension, he could be done. And I think it kind of forces you to book Weidman versus Rockhold too now. I think the only two options for Rockhold were the Weidman rematch and the Romero fight, and now that Romero is seemingly off the table, you make the Weidman rematch. Kennedy was hot on Twitter talking all sorts of shit, oh, did Jesus give you the steroids? Kennedy being Kennedy, sore about his loss to Romero for a litany of reasons. Pat, what is your take on Romero reportedly failing a test for these peptides and maybe being on the rack for a while because of it?
Well, you make a great point. Now with the UFC, with what they've done with their testing, they have these ramped up penalties for failed drug tests. So if he's looking at, I want to say it's at like a 2 year minimum now for your first pop, if I'm not mistaken, because I want to say it was always at least 9 months, typically a year minimum for any kind of violation related to steroids or HGH, anything like that. So if he's looking at potentially 2 years now, that puts him, you know, past 40 for the next time he could possibly compete. Having that ring rust on him, unless he wants to pull a Shlemenko, um, that could effectively kill his career. Who knows? Unless he gets back on that H train. Again, as you mentioned, Jake, it's listed as potential. At least everything I've seen has said, potential violation of USADA. Who knows if they're releasing this news before they're checking the B and C samples, or what in the world the case is, why it would be reported as a potential violation or anything like that. But yeah, the H, that's just super hard to catch there. And man, it does not sound good for our boy Yoel at this point. Tim Kennedy, my goodness, I wish he would stop with those tweets. We've all seen the glove grabbing gif. Don't go calling people a cheater when you cheated just as well in that fight. He's going around. He's tweeting at Derek Brunson. He's tweeting at everybody that also got their ass beat by Yoel Romero and saying, "Hey, look at what this guy did. Come on, dude. Don't don't be that guy, especially when you cheated in your fight." Derek Brunson, I might feel bad for him. He was legitimately winning in his fight. Hell, I want to say Honey Marks was winning in his fight against Yoel Romero until Yoel, I want to say he had third round TKOs against both Honey Marks and Derek Brunson. Those guys I feel bad for. They were legitimately winning against Yoel Romero until Yoel got those third round come from behind TKOs. But again, all allegations, alleged, potential at this point. Nothing confirmed that I can see. So, I will just say it does not look good, and certainly very disappointing if proven true. With that kind of frame, a lot of people are saying, he was not passing the eye test with that freaking body. I mean, Jesus Christ, he's not the person giving you that body. That is the overactive HGH or something. Freaking nature, Yoel Romero, more appropriate nickname.
The freak of nature, and that kind of makes a hole. I feel like you have Rockhold and Weidman, who will probably fight again. What next for Jacare? Do you make a title eliminator fight for him because his opponent tested hot? It was a close fight anyway. Do you make Jacare versus the winner of Anderson and Bisping? I'm not sure what you do there.
Yeah, that really is a great call. Jacare very easily could have gotten the decision in that fight against Yoel Romero. So that being changed to a no contest instead of an actual loss, that could benefit perhaps a little bit better. Just because, hey, that's a fight many people think he won anyways, and a no contest certainly looks a little bit better than a loss. And you can explain that and say, well, you know what, decision went the wrong way. Homeboy ended up being on steroids anyways. It was overturned to a no contest, so we can go ahead and insert him into a title shot right away. I can see an instance where they would make that happen. Then again, giving him one more shot, the winner of Bisping versus Silva, that might actually be the best. I mean, Jake, you're crushing it with these matches, homie. I think that might be a good option. Silva, wouldn't doubt he'd like another piece of the title. Michael Bisping never had that shot at the title, and man, if he's able to put in some work against Anderson Silva and somehow win that fight, I mean, give him a shot. Give Bisping a damn shot at the title. It's about time. I think I think that would be worth it just for the UFC, just for the sake of the fans. I think people could actually get behind that. I mean, at a certain point, it's just a feel good story. You know, the underdog who's been fighting in the UFC. I mean, gosh, for Bisping, it's got to be at least a decade now, probably maybe even 11 years. Um, so see him get a title shot, that would be quite the thing. But yeah, I could see them angling for the Jacare Souza versus Silva Bisping winner, or insert him straight in there. Um, Both work good with me, although I could have sworn I kind of heard that Weidman Rockhold 2 was being considered the thing. So I think you might be spot on with Jacare's next match being the Bisping Silva winner there, Jake.
So we go from Yoel Romero, a guy who failed a drug test we might not see around for a while, to a guy by the name of BJ Penn, who, if you've listened to this podcast for a long amount of time, we obviously haven't talked about him much recently, but you might know that he is my favorite fighter of all time. I honestly, I like almost all UFC fighters, and most fights, you know, I'm not really pulling that hard for anyone, and I try and be unbiased in breakdowns, because, you know, I kind of like both fighters, and there aren't many fighters, I think, Askren, Sonnen, Cormier, Penn, all make the short list. Aljo, any guest of this show, I'll really pull for. But you know, usually I keep it unbiased. BJ Penn, it's a name we haven't heard for a long time, haven't heard since summer of 2014, in what most MMA fans would probably agree is one of the most depressing fights ever, watching Penn march out for seemingly his legacy, and Frankie Edgar pushes his shit in for 20 minutes, TKOs him. Penn had this super awkward fighting stance where he was like fighting upright. Like, I think it was who was it? I think it was maybe I was listening to an MMA podcast recently, and I want to give them credit, but basically they said Penn fought like he had a rod stuck up his ass, which as sort of brutal a breakdown it is, it's kind of true. Penn got worked. Penn cried at the post-fight presser. Penn said he was done. A guy, you know, he's getting older, and it made sense. Even before the Frankie fight, we didn't know if he was going to ever fight again, and Frankie seemed to close the book. Now all of a sudden, stuff is popping off with Nick Lentz and BJ Penn. Nick Lentz, a current fighter under Mike Dolce, who BJ Penn apparently had a falling out with after the fight, summer 2014. Penn and Lentz, I guess, don't like one another, and they started jawing back and forth. Lentz called him a spoiled brat, wrote a poem about him, and every fan's thinking, BJ Penn, you know, we just talked about him earlier in the show about, you know, being one of the only two weight class champions. You know, Penn is easily a Hall of Famer, one of the best fighters ever, and everyone thought he was for sure done. And now he's going back with Nick Lentz. Here, I'll read their last two interactions with one another. The one by Nick Lentz is pretty lengthy, but I think it's worth a read just because the man dropped some hot takes. Penn tweets or Instagrams at Lentz. This is a formal challenge for Nick Lentz to meet me in the Octagon March 5th in Las Vegas. Nick, you wrote a silly poem about me, making fun of me. You said stuff about me and my parents, and you've been making Bring Penn Back a hashtag. I ask you today to be a man and back up everything you said. Talk the talk, walk the walk. Uncle BJ is mad already. And it's a picture of him holding up two fists. Nick Lentz fires back with this it's an essay, and I'll skim through the parts that I can skim through. But he's got some hot takes. This is Lentz's response to Penn challenging Lentz to a fight at UFC 197. BJ, I received your poorly worded, utterly predictable message. In spite of its clumsy structure, awful spelling, incorrect usage, you one point state that I wrote a poem about you making fun of yourself, and general air of arrogance entitled Stupidity. I'm considering your request. There are, of course, some conditions. First, I'm never competing at 145 ever again. Neither should you. I came to this conclusion after doing careful research and deciding what was right for my long-term health as my short-term performance. If you fight at 145, it won't be long before you're eating banana mush in a nut house. I'm accountable to my family and my future with them, because you are an impulsive tyrant surrounded by yes men. He called BJ Penn an impulsive tyrant. You have no ability to make rational, intelligent decisions, so I'm making this one for you. If we fight, it would be at 155. Second, I'm not fighting in March. Neither are you. You may imagine you are, and the imbeciles you surround yourself may nod in agreement like the trained dogs they are, but you aren't fighting in March. You've lied to your fans and let them down over and over and over, and nobody is clamoring to put the BJ Penn excuse factory back in business. Were I to agree to fight you in March and whoop your ass, it would only give you and your lackeys the BJ Penn didn't have enough time bullshit excuse. Additionally, if we do fight, it will be on my timetable, not yours. You're retired and have no schedule. I'm an active fighter on the roster with a schedule and training platform that is not beholden to your desires, grudges, or need for narcissistic supply. I mean, Lentz goes in on this. Third. Scathing. Third. You still owe Mike Dolce $22,000. Knowing him, he's too gracious and dignified a man to revisit the traitorous, backstabbing skullduggery you engaged in with him after the third time Frankie Edgar kicked your ass inside out. I, however, don't have the luxury of grace, and dignity is best left out of any exchange that includes you. You will donate $22,000 of your purse to the Hawaii Dog Foundation, a no-kill, all-volunteer rescue organization working hard to rescue and rehabilitate dogs in Hawaii, in Mike Dulce's name. Give these conditions some thought. They're non-negotiable. They're rules you will abide by, or you can go whistle. I have a contract and plenty of guys to fight. As a narcissist, you have nothing but an image, and you need attention. You have all the money you could ever spend, but it doesn't satisfy you. I have what you need. I'm in charge. You can do what narcissists usually do when confronted by a higher power. Slink away, and slink away is in all caps. Or you can confront your needs, realize I can fulfill them, and come to terms with me looming over you, holding the... and then on a new line in all caps and in bold, whip hand. I'm already in charge, you poor deluded fool. I did more to motivate you with 2 poems than all your yes men and titles and highlights could. Get as angry as you want. Go out behind your huge inherited estate and kick rocks. Go cry to your mommy. Go shit in your hat and bark at the moon. You want to fight? Then it's on my terms. Face it. Now run along, little man. Go find a way to swallow your overarching pride and do it my way, or scuttle about like a deformed crab at low tide, like a masochist at last call, desperately looking for somebody else to thrash you. You can go to Greg Jackson's. You can go to Jermaine Jackson's. You can listen to Mahalia Jackson. You can resurrect Jackson fucking Pollock to paint you a better picture of yourself than the one we all see. But you're an unclaimed, busted down suitcase on a dusty shelf in an abandoned bus terminal. Accept my conditions or rot in obscurity. Nick Lentz, your boss. This is one of the best promos in the history of mixed martial arts. Like, my God, Lentz. I mean, I am a huge Penn fan, and if they do square off, don't get me wrong, I will be rooting for my boy BJ Penn. But this makes me like Lentz a little bit more. This was, I mean, this was a promo to defeat all other promos. You know, Penn sort of trying to step up and challenge him, and Nick Lentz comes back with like, if he wrote all this himself and came up with everything like, or scuttle about like a deformed crab at low tide, like if he came up with all this, props to him. I was very impressed with this promo that Lentz sent back to Penn. What do you make of it?
Well, just given the general rate of illiteracy these days overall, and especially for a fighter to have produced this, I commend Nick Lentz highly. I've always liked him. He's always been a very tough guy at 155 and 145 pounds. Good to see him back at 155, and I dare say he still might be a little bit deluded himself to say that he is BJ Penn's boss. We know what's really good with the UFC and what's good with Dana White, and it's that money. If this whole open letter response to BJ Penn, which certainly serves for some good poster board material for BJ Penn, and definitely some good hype, like this whole little thing they've been building up. They're doing a good job of doing something for a potential fight if it does come to pass. And BJ Penn, knowing his purse, hey, maybe he would. And I mean, it's kind of funny. It is it's a Hawaiian nonprofit kill shelter. Or, well, I don't know if they said nonprofit, but a Hawaiian non-kill shelter for dogs. So it is a local service that would be supported by BJ Penn's donation. I don't know. It's so funny how he comes up with. I don't even know what you call this diatribe. It was very good, very very verbose, very wordy. I couldn't believe it. It was like a little mini novel there. Lentz really outdid himself with that one. I kind of do want to see this fight now. It's very interesting, especially with BJ Penn reportedly being at Jackson Winklejohn. Jake, you mentioned BJ Penn's fighting style in his last fight against Frankie Edgar, and it was so curious because no coach in the world would ever tell anyone to fight like that, probably in any style of combat sport. And BJ Penn himself, being a multi-weight class champion in the UFC, one of the only people to do it besides Randy Couture, with his skill sets as they were, you would think he would never fight like that in his life. It was so weird to seeing him back at 155 pounds. And with Jackson Winklejohn, that's the thing we've talked about before. Pretty much everybody's been praising them and riding those nuts pretty hard, just because they are some of the best game planners. They got one of the biggest squads, huge team over there, world champions left and right. It really is one of the best games going in town. BJ Penn getting in there, man, that could really do some serious things. I mean, who isn't a fan of BJ Penn, really, with what he's done in the sport? And he's always been one of the greatest, and really seems to be one of those guys where, like some of the other great fighters we've seen, it seems like only the question of their own motivation, that seems to be the greatest challenge for them. Can they get up for this fight? And BJ Penn getting in there, training in a place like Jackson Winklejohn, maybe that will help rekindle some of this fire. Maybe it would serve him better to not come back for UFC 197. Maybe UFC 200 would be a little bit better. You know, get conditioned. Who knows how well he's been staying conditioned. Again, that's been a huge question throughout BJ Penn's entire career. Take some time, make sure the conditioning's right, get with the new coaching staff, see what you guys can come up with, see what kind of opponent you can come up with. And it certainly seems like the Lentz and Penn are doing a good job promoting this would-be fight together. So who knows? Maybe UFC 200 we could see it pop off, if not 197.
Yeah, and I was hoping we might see it in March just because I'll be in Vegas for that. Nick apparently saying no to that. Maybe we'll see it at UFC 200 in July. Maybe we see Penn Lentz as the main event of the prelims or the opener of the pay-per-view. Front Row Brian is predicting that the main and co-main event at 200 will be Conor McGregor, Frankie Edgar, and Robbie Lawler versus George St. Pierre. That would be interesting, seeing Penn and GSP both return and fight on the same card. We will see what happens there. But let's move on. I guess the UFC Fight Night 81 coming up this Saturday. Pat, you have any plans for it? I don't know. I was invited out to some thing at a bar this Saturday, but I think I'm going to be a bum and stay in and watch this card because it's going to be a good one. You got TJ Dillashaw, Dominic Cruz, obviously, pardon me, Tony Pettis, Eddie Alvarez, a bunch more fun cards before we really dive into it. What are you going to be doing for it?
Well, you know what? Actually, I've got some family coming up from further south, Southern California. Going to be having a little get together. Going to be throwing on the fights. You know this, so just going to be kicking back at the pad with the fam, watching some goodness. I mean, it's looking like a stacked card here for the Fox Sports 1 from top to bottom. 4 fights on Fight Pass and then 8 fights altogether on the Fox Sports 1 portion.
Yeah, and let's get into the prelims. Maybe the fight I'm most pumped about is the main event of the preliminary card. Paul Felder facing off with Darren Cruikshank. Darren Cruikshank, I believe, our first guest ever. We had him on episode 1. I think it was him and John Albert on the first ever episode, which I rarely do interviews now, and I was doing them 2 at a time back then. Maybe I got to turn up the interview game. But we had Darren Cruikshank on after he was eliminated from Tough. And he's been a part of the TMP family ever since, writing some wins, writing some losses. After Tough, he man, that's fucking wild. He has had he's had 12 fights in the UFC since we had him on. Beat Chris Tickle. That's right. He had just beat Chris Tickle after the Tough Live finale, and we had him on. And then he goes on and gets some impressive wins against Henry Martinez, Yves Edwards, Mike Rio, Eric Koch. But of recent, he's been struggling a little bit. In his last 5 fights, you had the one no contest with KJ Nunes after an unfortunate eye poke from Nunes into Cruikshank's eye. And he's only won 1 fight against Anthony Njokuani. In his credit, the 3 guys he's lost to were all beasts. Jorge Masvidal, who is a monster standing up. Beneil Dariush, who is a monster on the mat. And James Krause, who's a monster all around. But he's going up against a Paul Felder, who in my eyes had the KO of 2015, that spinning back fist against Danny Castillo. After that, his 2015 didn't go as planned, losing 2 fights to Edson Barboza via unanimous decision and a split decision against Ross Pearson. Interested where the line is on this event. I actually haven't checked yet. Paul Felder expectedly is the favorite by a wide margin, though. He's minus 265. And I wouldn't really disagree with that, Both of them will probably prefer to stand up. But in his recent fights, Darren Cruikshank just hasn't been pulling the trigger as much as he needs to, where with Felder, that has not been an issue at all. So I will be rooting for Darren, but if I had to pick, Felder just has seemed a little more crisp in his last fights. Other fights on the Fight Pass prelims: Francimar Barroso versus Elvis Mutapchik, a name we haven't heard from for a while. Rob Font versus Joey Gomez. Ilir Latifi against Sean O'Connell. And Charles Rosa against Augusto Mendez. I have a kid in my class named Chris Rosa, and I've probably called him Charles like a dozen times because of this featherweight in the UFC. The 4 prelim fights on Fox Sports 1. Maximo Blanco versus Luke Sanders. Chris Wade versus Mehdi Baghdad. And Tim Boach against Ed Herman. And the main event of the Fox Sports 1 prelims, Patrick Cote against Ben Saunders. This is going to be a fun fight. You have, the Predator, Patrick Cote, who's feels like he's been around forever. And the guy rarely loses. In his last, In his last 11 fights, he's lost twice. He's 9-2. And he's defeated a lot of impressive opponents. The only losses coming to Kung Lee, who's a middleweight and was probably juiced to the gills, and Stephen Thompson, who's going to be fighting Big Rig come UFC 196, taking on Ben Saunders, who was in the UFC back 2009, 2010, got cut, and then put a really good run together in Bellator, finishing a lot of fights, has joined the UFC and hasn't lost since. He's 3-0 in the UFC. An omoplata against Chris Heatherly, TKO against Joe Riggs, and a split decision win about 6 months ago against Kenny Robertson, who is a game fighter. As far as picking this fight, the line in Vegas is almost even. It's minus 120 for Killa B against Patrick Cote, who is plus 100. Cote has been doing enough to get wins, but he did look impressive as shit with a TKO against Josh Berkman in his last fight this past August. But I see Ben Sanders getting the fight to the mat and being able to break out a little 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu and maybe get a submission against the Predator. But this could go to a decision for either guy. This could be finished in any way for either guy. Patrick Cote, I believe, is a brown belt in BJJ and a black belt in Judo. So I'm not picking a Saunders sub because the Predator is bad on the mat, because he is not at all. Both of these guys, I talk about tool belts and having, the skills to fight both standing up and on the mat. Both of these guys are not deficient really anywhere. They've got a pretty stacked tool belt, and this is going to be this could be fireworks. It could be super boring because they both know that their opponent is so talented. Really difficult fight to call, but I'll call it a Saunders submission. What are you thinking about the prelims, P Money?
Damn, Jake, I think they're looking pretty good these days. Like you said, the Fight Pass feature fight with Darren Cruikshank. Of course, he's been a friend of the MMA podcast, and of course, with my homie Big Ray, we're doing a MMA Mental. Had Darren Cruikshank on there. I want to say maybe even twice.
Are you all right?
I'm all right, Jake.
That's absolutely mental.
Big shout out to Ray. We're mental over here about you, bud. We had Cruikshank on there a couple times. I know you guys have had him on here. Heck, we might have interviewed him together as well. I don't even recall, but Paul Felder, Also an exciting, both these guys, real exciting fighters. Explosive technical striking from both guys. Like you said, they probably won't want to take this one to the ground. At least I'm sure all the fans are hoping that they don't. Great cap to the UFC Fight Pass preliminary card, which still has some pretty good action to it. Ilir Latifi versus Sean O'Connell, decent light heavyweight scrap. I like that one there. O'Connell, he's been a scrappy guy since coming into the UFC light heavyweight division, flying under the radar there. His first UFC debut was a pretty bad loss to Ryan GMO, knocked out in the first round. Had a split against Gian Vellante, but he's been able to put it together. Got a TKO over Matt Van Buren, another TKO over Anthony Ferroche. So he's now 2-2 in the UFC, and he's got a good style. Likes to throw the hands. Good counter wrestling. Kind of similar to Ilir Latifi. Ilir Latifi, maybe a little bit more of a wrestling style with the ground and pound. Trains with Alexander Gustafsson. Should be a good one there for the 205-pound division. We've been seeing that one. I want to say the least active division of all the UFC. So always good to see some light heavyweight scraps. Speaking of Tim Boetsch and Ed Herman, I want to say they're both moving back up to 205 for the first time in some time. As a matter of fact, I can't even recall if Ed Herman has ever fought at 205 pounds in his UFC career. I'm going to have to go back and double check. I believe, he's always been at 185 pounds to the best of my recollection. Every single fight started from his first one. Kendall Grove, I know that was a 185-pound contest. So going up to 185, and this could be a good decision for both guys there. I want to say I saw a tweet from Marcus Davis, the Irish hand grenade, saying Tim Boetsch was looking real good. Looking quick, looking powerful. So maybe this is the right move, going back up to 205 for him. And Ed Herman, who knows? The weight cutting process just really drains you, and this really could help these guys to fight at an optimal healthy condition. So looking forward to seeing that one, how that plays out. And Maximo Blanco always brings it. He tears it up in the featherweight division. I'm not familiar with his opponent, Luke Sanders. I think he's a last-minute replacement there. Maximo Blanco, he's always killing it at 145. And he's named before as well. I want to say he's been doing well for himself lately. You never know. You can see him up in the mix there. Now he's got 3 wins in a row right now. So
your quality is a little shaky. Walk toward the router.
Oh.
Take a step to the router.
Walk into the router.
Walk into the router. Said we walk into the router.
Ooh, yeah.
All right.
Where we at?
You are sounding a little bit better.
Okay. Yeah, Maximo Blanco versus Luke Sanders. Not too familiar with Luke Sanders, but Maximo Blanco, he brings the heat, always starching people at 145 pounds. He's got the 3 wins in a row. Definitely going to like to see how he does. He's kicking off the preliminary card on Fox Sports 1. And, as you mentioned, Patrick Cote versus Ben Saunders, that's going to be a sweet fight. Both these guys have been in the UFC for some time. Ben Saunders making his return more recently, as was Patrick Cote. And they're back to put on a scrap, and it should be a good one, as you mentioned. Both guys good all the way around. Patrick Cote, I'd like to think more of a straight-up boxing guy. And Ben Saunders, he's got a more diverse Muay Thai attack. He likes to work with the clinch, get the Muay Thai plum going. He works some real dangerous knees and elbows there. Very long for the weight class at 170 pounds. Works some great submissions there. Ben Saunders has been looking legit. Love watching both these guys fight. Definitely easy fight of the night candidate right there for the featured bout on Fox Sports 1. And I think that's probably my highlight for the Fox Sports 1 prelim portion of the card.
That brings us to the main event. How do you want to break this one down? You want to do the 3 and then the main event on its own?
Yeah, we could do that.
How are we gonna break it down? Got 2
How do
lightweight
you
fights
want
and a
it?
heavyweight fight to lead off the. And I kept calling it the UFC on Fox card. I thought it was on Fox, but no, it's on Fox Sports 1. So my apologies. The event will kick off. What time is this motherfucker starting? The Fight Pass prelims start at 6 Eastern, 3 Pacific. The Fox Sports 1 prelims kick off at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific, and the main card starts at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific, same time that a pay-per-view would launch off, but it'll be on Fox Sports 1. Man, I'm looking forward to breaking down this Dillashaw Cruz fight, but let's start with the main card. Now that we got the prelims behind us, Ross Pearson versus Francisco Trinaldo, Travis Brown versus Matt Mitrione, and Anthony Pettis against Eddie Alvarez. Pettis, a big favorite against Alvarez, and Travis Brown and Ross Pearson both rocking minus 150 edges over Matt Mitrione and Francisco Trinaldo, respectively. As far as the Pearson-Trinaldo fight, Pearson has just he's fought, I feel like, everybody at 155. The guy's got a lot of fights. Hasn't been able to string 2 wins together since 2012. Since then, he got a no contest against Melvin Gillard, lost a bullshit decision to Diego Sanchez, finished Gray Maynard, got finished by Ali Aquina, finished Sam Stout, got decisioned by Evan Dunham, and then lost a split decision to Paul Felder. Francisco Trinaldo, on the other hand, has also had a lot of UFC fights. I believe this will be number 12 for him, and he's on a 4-fight winning streak. He won decisions against Leandro Silva, Akbar Areola, and Norman Park before TKOing Chad Laprise in 2015. Man, I don't want to say, man, this is a really tough fight. Ross Pearson should be the favorite here, but I'm going to give this one my upset special. I think Chad Laprise looked very good on Tough Canada, and to get finished by the Brazilian, by Massaranduba, I believe is his nickname. He fought at middleweight back in 2012. Now he's down to 155. I see him getting this win against Ross Pearson. The Travis Brown, Matt Mitrione fight. This is, I don't know. I feel like this is Brown's fight to lose. Yes, Matt Mitrione has looked good, but I just, all of his wins are against guys with sort of weak chins. In his last 8 fights, he's 4-4. His last 7 fights have all ended in the first round, which is impressive. Maybe he's 4-3 in those fights. All the wins coming by KO or TKO. Got finished by Roy Nelson and then subbed out by Brendan Schaub and Ben Rothwell. Travis Brown, he's not glass-chinned at all. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I think this is a first-round finished fight, too, because of, both of these guys, their last 8 fights, 7 have ended in the first round. I'm taking Travis Brown, though. I think Brown maybe has better defense than the guys that Mitrione has been able to finish, and I think he clinches up and maybe lands some of those devastating elbows like he got it against Josh Barnett. The co-main event is probably the only, or it is really the only, according to Vegas, one-sided fight on the main card. You have Pettis, who, as a champion, looked so dominant. He killed Joe Lozon, killed Donald Cerrone, was beating the shit out of Bendo before he subbed out Gilbert, and then got just outmanned by Rafael dos Anjos, Eddie Alvarez. I hate to play MMA math, but both of these guys have fought Gilbert Melendez recently, Both of these guys have fought Donald Cerrone semi-recently. Pettis whooped Cerrone's ass, and Cerrone beat up Eddie. And as far as Melendez goes, Eddie had a close fight with him, and Pettis just served him a shit sandwich. So I'm not going to pick against Pettis here. I think he... Man, the guy never fights. He fought once in 2014, once in 2015. Let's hope he has a more active 2016 and can sort of rebuild his road to fighting for a championship. But, yeah, we'll see him back in action against Eddie Alvarez, a fight. I feel like there are a lot there. If you would have waited to make this fight a few more months, you probably could have found some better 155ers than Alvarez to put up against Pettis, but this will be a nice tune-up fight for him. But I see him winning by KO or TKO early in this one. What do you think of those three fights?
Three excellent scraps, and I'm really liking where you're at. I'm liking where your head's at with these breakdowns, Jake. I'm on board with you. Ross Pearson versus Francisco Trinaldo. I mean, Trinaldo has been doing good, as you mentioned. He's on that 4-fight win streak right now. Got the TKO over Chad Laprise. But typically speaking, as we've seen in Francisco Trinaldo's career, old Masvidal Duba, when he takes that step up in competition, he has not fared so well. He has a loss to Gleison Tebow, lost to Piotr Hallman, which actually, interestingly enough, both came out as having failed PED tests later on in their career. Interesting. The only person that he's lost to in the UFC that hasn't, Michael Maverick Chiesa. But since that loss, he does have the 4 wins in a row. It'll be interesting to see how he steps up against Ross Pearson. Pearson, he's a guy, he's been in the UFC for much longer than Francisco. Even though Trinaldo now, he's got a solid amount of fights under his belt. I want to say he's got at least, he's like 11 fights into his career now. But Ross Pearson, he's been in for much longer now. And he's been fighting a lot tougher competition, probably throughout the duration of his UFC career. I mean, Dennis Seaver, Cole Miller, Spencer Fisher, Edson Barbosa, Cub Swanson, Melvin Gillard, Ali Akinta, Sam Stout, Evan Dunham, Paul Felder. Masvidal Duba has hardly faced an opponent like that. And Ross Pearson, he's had some good ones. He took the split decision from Paul Felder in his most recent one, did drop one to Evan Dunham before that, had a beautiful KO, one of my candidates for KO of the year 2015 over Sam Stout at UFC 185. So he's been in there with the top competition, and he has beat them, something Masvidal Duba has yet to do. Got to give that one to Pearson for myself, but that should be a good one. Travis Brown versus Matt Mitrione. Great scrap there. Travis Brown, always a threat. Both real big heavyweights. I want to say Matt Mitrione's like 6'4", 6'5". Travis Brown coming in 6'6", 6'7". I dare say I'm almost leaning towards Mitrione in this one. Mitrione, bear with me now, folks. He's got the lower center of gravity in the grappling exchanges. He's got that in his back pocket. And as far as the striking goes, I dare say I like Matt Mitrione's overall striking game better. Granted, Travis Brown really does well with his reach, and he's very good at employing his reach. But I just feel like Mitrione, with the time he spent with the Black Zillions, I like what he's been doing with his striking. His last couple losses have all been submissions. But other than that, I mean, the striking game is coming along crisp. When he wins, he's knocking people out. And I think he's got a good shot to do that against Travis Brown. Travis Brown got his bell rung against Arlovsky, and maybe we saw a little bit of hole in the game there. So who knows what the coaches over there at Black Zillions are going to be drawing up for Mitrione and his striking game. Because again, 6'7", that's a long dude. If you miss, you're missing big, and that's going to leave holes, and that's going to be some opportunity for Mitrione to exploit there. So I'm smelling a live dog here. Could be wrong. Would not be surprised if Travis Brown wins. He is the rightful favorite. And again, he's training over there with Jackson Winklejohn. So talk about coaches drawing up game plans. They got what it takes.
It's got to be a first-round finish,
You like
right?
watching people get fucked for free?
I feel like it does. I feel like somebody's getting knocked out in the first round. I really don't see it going any other way, except for potentially a Travis Brown submission. And then Anthony Pettis versus Eddie Alvarez, both great fighters, very scrappy dudes. But like you, I think Anthony Pettis is going to take this one decisively and early. This is just the kind of guy that Anthony Pettis has been beating throughout the duration of his career, similar to Benson Henderson, great wrestler, great striker. I dare say Eddie Alvarez may even have a little bit better striking than Benson Henderson. Although one thing we do see, Eddie Alvarez, anybody who's followed his career know that Eddie Alvarez gets dropped in every single one of his fights. It's not even an exaggeration to say he literally gets dropped in every single one of his fights. I dare you to show me a fight of his where he did not get dropped. If you can send me the link, I would appreciate to be proven wrong because it so rarely happens. But that is a dangerous thing.
It's probably the only fight in his last 6 fights where he didn't get dropped. Chandler dropped him in both fights. Pitbull dropped him, I think. Cerrone dropped him. Gilbert dropped him.
Yeah. Oh, undoubtedly. Yeah, I forgot about the Aoki fight, but okay, so I'll take that one. I appreciate that, Jake. But Pettis, this is a guy who he will capitalize on those. He will capitalize on those openings, and against a fighter who's been known to take shots like that. That's not what you want when you're going up against a pinpoint striking assassin. The thing with Anthony Pettis is not just he's not necessarily a boxer. He is more of a taekwondo, karate, martial artist. He's not going to hang in the pocket and bang with you. He's going to throw some crazy flying, jumping off the cage tiger knee like he landed against Donald Cerrone. He's going to he's got great technical shots. He's going to hit you with that liver shot. That's what he ultimately felled Donald Cerrone with, a nice, sweet body kick right to the liver just to shut you down. He's very quick, very fast with those legs. He does have good hands, but again, with the hands, you don't really see him putting together the 1-2-3 punch combos. More just very much so picking his shots. But I think that will serve him well. Pettis also has very crafty grappling. So if Alvarez wants to try and employ some wrestling, try and take this to the ground, Pettis is very much at home there. We didn't really get to see that against Rafael Dos Anjos, but Rafael Dos Anjos, he's a different style of grappling than Eddie Alvarez. I think that it would be safe to say Pettis has a jiu-jitsu advantage in this fight. Man, I must say I've got to give it to Anthony Pettis. I'm leaning less than 2 rounds on this fight. I would certainly say it's probably going to be a first round finish here. Wouldn't be surprised if Eddie Alvarez tries to come out and put some pressure on Anthony Pettis, Rafael Dos Anjos style, but you got to be careful coming in against a guy like Pettis because he will just pick you apart, and I think he will get the TKO. I'd say first round as well, Jake.
And before we dive into Dillashaw Cruz, are any of these lines you would go after? Dillashaw minus 145, Pettis minus 345, Brown minus 150, Pearson minus 150. I would maybe put up a Pettis Cruz parlay just because I'm a wild man, but I rarely bet unless I'm in Vegas, and even then I'll put 10 or $20 up. It isn't like I'm throwing up a bunch of money every event like a lot of people I know. But do any of these main event lines, if you were in Vegas and you could do it legally, would they interest you at all?
Ooh, what did you say the line was on Pettis here?
Pettis is minus... Oh, shit. I clicked away. Pettis is minus 345, and I'm looking now at props on the main event. Dillashaw Cruz, minus 190. It goes over 4.5 rounds. I feel like it's fair to say that this is probably going to go to a decision. I would probably put the money down on it being a decision. Dillashaw obviously
give me some finish odds there.
Yeah, Dillashaw inside the distance plus 300. Cruz inside the distance plus 450.
Ooh.
So they're saying Dillashaw more likely to get the finish, but if it goes to a decision, actually, wow, Dillashaw plus 166 wins by decision. Cruz wins by decision plus 240. I think that's your money line, people. Cruz by decision plus 240. That's your J Walt. I'll call it your J Walt lock of the week. I need to get a background noise to play during that. But yeah, plus 240 Cruz by decision. Anything standing out for you?
Well, I must say, if you're going Cruz, go the money line. I know the props are tempting, but with a fight like this, I'll tell you what, I like that plus 450 for Dominic Cruz inside the distance. We have seen TJ Dillashaw stop to strikes by flyweight contender John Dodson. This is a man who could not stop Demetrius Johnson in 2 tries. The man that Dominic Cruz was suplexing around the ring. Yes, folks, I'm doing some very circuitous MMA math here, but think about it. Dominic Cruz in his last fight, out for nearly 3 years, comes back and TKOs a mudhole into Kei Mizukaki like we've never seen. This was an unexpected surprise from the Dominator. He's coming back. Not as long of a stay out against a guy that we've seen knocked out by a flyweight. Dominic Cruz at plus 450. This is a 25-minute fight, and you know Dominic Cruz. TJ Dillashaw, he's shown gas for 25 minutes, but Dominic Cruz, his gas, oh my goodness. He's good to go for 25, full steam. I would not be surprised to see my boy, the Dominator, get the finish. I really would not be surprised if either guy got the finish in this fight. Decision does seem like the likely one, but the way the guys have been putting it, oh man. See, now I'm dissecting this fight a million different ways, Jake, which is always, like I say, the money line is typically the safe way to go, unless you just know.
Pick it. You got it. Pick it. Cruz by finish. Pick it.
Cruz by finish. I mean,
the P money lock.
There it is. The slammer of the week. Plus 450. I mean, put a little bit on that. Why not? Put a 20 spot on that. You want $90 back. That's
I'm saying by decision. Pat's saying by finish. It's looking like we're picking the same guy, but man, the X factor in this fight undoubtedly is gonna be the ring rust. It's going to be how can Cruz rebound from fighting one time in 4 years. You look at the matchup, it's virtually the same. Cruz is 1 year older. He's got 2 inches of height and 1 inch in reach, but it's not really going to be a factor if it's such a small amount. They both fight orthodox, which it's funny because they're both very unorthodox fighters and switch back and forth a ton. So to call them both anything, I mean, they both should be called switch fighters, but we don't really have that, at least now. And yeah, you look at their records, and Cruz has fought a lot more guys. Dillashaw fought Barao twice. Aside from that, he stylistically matched up very well against Renan Barao, the way he pops in and out, throws a bunch of feints. Aside from Renan Barao, his 2 toughest opponents, Rafael Assunção, John Dodson. He lost both of those fights. Dominic Cruz, he beat Mighty Mouse. He beat Faber. He beat Benavidez. He beat a lot of guys. But like I said, since 2011, since beating Mighty Mouse, he's fought once. Just a super unlucky string of knee injuries and groin tears. Both of these guys, the footwork is incredible. The angles they cut are incredible. I think Dillashaw, the only real difference between their fighting styles, Dillashaw seems to be more offense oriented, and Cruz seems to be more defense oriented. He's focusing more on not getting hit, while Dillashaw is throwing a lot more, landing more, throwing more, trying to get in more shots normally than Cruz. Cruz is a little bit more defensive. I think this fight will take place standing up because both of them are very good scramblers. If anyone has the advantage on the mat, it's probably Dillashaw, who has a background in wrestling, while Cruz doesn't really have a grappling background. But you know, he's lethally effective in his own right, so it's not like we'll see Dillashaw just take down Cruz and dominate him the entire fight, no pun intended. This could go either way, and like I said, the X factor is what Cruz are we going to see, and apparently against Takeya Mizugaki, ring rust didn't have much of a factor there. I see Cruz winning it because he's got the more experience, the better fight IQ. But man, the storylines we've seen Dillashaw. Dillashaw is a monster. Don't get me wrong. But I don't know. Cruz was just so lethal back then, and he still hasn't lost. The guy is still on an 11-fight win streak, and I think he makes it 12 Saturday night in Boston. What do you think?
Jake, I think you have a great point there. Dominic Cruz, I see him going to 12-0 on a 12-fight winning streak after Saturday night, regaining what he never lost, that UFC championship. Maybe it's just wishful thinking. I don't know. Both these guys, as we've seen, TJ, I almost called him TJ Cruz, legit. TJ Dillashaw has really emulated Dominic Cruz's style well. He's got a great movement. The striking's coming along well. He's got some pop on those strikes, and he's stopped Henry Burrell twice, and he's just really, he's got the momentum, which is why he's a smart bet in this fight. But I think that Dominic Cruz, as we've seen, and really in a fight like this, of course, MMA math, never perfect, but when you have two guys that are just so similar in style, sometimes that's all you have to go on. Of course, there are the intangibles that we talked about, the knee injury, the timeout that Dominic Cruz has had to endure. Because yes, he did look great coming back from the almost 3-year layoff that he endured before he faced Mizugaki. But again, this is a complete different injury, complete different leg. We still don't know how he's going to look. So there's an X factor there. But I think that Dominic Cruz, if he's able to make it to the cage, he wouldn't be making it to the cage if he wasn't quote unquote 100%. Yes, no fighter's ever 100%, but I don't think he'd be getting in there for the championship belt if he wasn't ready to compete for the championship belt. And this is a guy that has just defined hardworking, championship caliber type of athlete for a long time in the WEC as well as the UFC for years now, and he's beaten the guys like Rafael Sunsao. He's beaten guys that have beaten him. Again, with the circuitous MMA math, but Dominic Cruz has been around for so long, and he's been competing at the highest level for such a long time, and his only loss was up at 145 pounds to Uriah Faber, which he ended up avenging that sole loss. So he does have really what I like to call the gold standard in records. Yes, he does have a loss there, but he has subsequently avenged that loss, and he's gone on to hold and defend the WEC and UFC championship for some time until that unfortunate series of injuries kept him out and eventually led him to being stripped from that championship belt. But I think in this fight on Saturday at Fox Sports 1, I think Dominic Cruz, he's coming back to take what is rightfully his. He's coming back to prove that he is the hardest working, most knowledgeable fighter in the game, and that he's been using the style he's been using and employing for years that fighters are just starting to use now. he's been using it for so long for a reason, because he is that smart of a fighter. And I think he's going to be able to find the holes in TJ Dillashaw's game. Of course, no fighter has a perfect game, and TJ has very well said that he plans to exploit the holes in Dominic Cruz's game as well. But I think Dominic Cruz, he is the uncrowned champion. He is the champion that never lost his belt. And I think he is going to come back and usurp his rightful belt from the placeholder TJ Dillashaw. And we'll see Dominic Cruz once again ascend the throne at 135 pounds at the UFC.
And we will be back next week to talk about the card, talk about the winner and the loser of each fight, who they should fight next. Thanks so much for tuning in. As always, you can catch us on Twitter at The MMA Podcast, themmapodcast.com. The link's at the top to follow and subscribe. Pat, where do we find you and what it do?
Well, what it do, you follow your boy P Money at Sweet Pappy Jones. Hit me up all the social media at Sweet Pappy Jones. That's your boy. The Twitters, the Instagrams, wherever. We're talking fights. We're having a good time. Chopping up game with your boy Jake. All of the MMA Podcast extended family. Much love.
Chopping up that game. Like I said, look forward to doing some interviews these coming few weeks. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this card on Fox Sports 1. Dillashaw Cruz, the fight of the month. I don't think, how does the rest of the month look as far as cards? I believe there's a World Series of Fighting card the 23rd, a Bellator card the 29th, that UFC on Fox card, Johnson versus Bader on the 30th. So we still got some more fights this month to look forward to. Looking forward to breaking them down. Thank you for tuning in. Shout out to all of you, and until next week, we gone.
Jake, tune into the MMA Podcast every Tuesday night.
Act the wild style, always been a foul child. Realize, sucker, I be the coming like Noah.
The MMA Podcast, Jake is the host. And since Ramsey's been in a wheelchair, the Aunt Jimmy Show has been on a roll. I wanna say John Jones is a hoe, so I think that I'll pick up the phone and dial 213-457-3380. We got hot takes on the stove. You get blood on your clothes if you're sitting in the front row. I throw on my gi and then I lace the hoops. I'll have Gal lying down cause he ain't the truth. And if Alan wasn't a cop, I'd mention you. And shout out to Ross Finkelstein the Jew. Cause according to you, you're an MMA guru. I'll prove Bisbing lost his hands, Count Dooku. If you're a fancy boy, you get a 2-minute slot. Mystery wants a title shot. So listen to the MMA Podcast. Throw a high kick, but I block that. Call me T-Ass, screaming George, where you at? I want the strap. When you know that I'll never tap. So listen to the MMA Podcast. Throw a high kick, but I block that. Call me Diaz, screaming George, where you at? I want the strap. And you know that I won't tap. Mystery. The MMA Podcast. Most of us just live and breathe this fighting shit. Shout out to Jake. Shout out to Jake.